Hello and welcome to my presentation on injury associated with CrossFit. What does the evidence say? This is a recording for those that can't make it to Therapy Expo, which is in 2 days' time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through my presentation for those of you that can't be at the presentation. So I'll be presenting on injury associated with CrossFit. What does the evidence say? My name's Dale Walker. I'm a university lecturer at the University of Salford. I'm also one of the co-founders of the extreme sports and training rehabilitation company Bulletproof Bodies. So the presentation content will be as follows. I'm going to tell you why you should listen to me. I'm going to explain my history with CrossFit. I'm going to talk about my experience in Afghanistan and why that's of value. What is CrossFit, what the literature says, what the evidence suggests, my research, and some take-home messages. Okay, so why should you listen to me? So I'm the co-founder of Bulletproof Bodies UK, which is an extreme sports and training rehab service. As I said before, I'm a university lecturer in physiotherapy and I specialise in exercise prescription. I'm research active, whether I'm talking about orthotics, whether I'm talking about load carriage with the military, or whether I'm talking about CrossFit. I did my Masters in Sport and Exercise Medicine at Cardiff Metropolitan University. I'm an ex-Army physiotherapist. I now serve in the Royal Army Medical Corps Reserves. Obviously, I've got a BSc in physiotherapy, but I'm also an ex-Royal Marine Commando. I'm an ex-Army physical training instructor. And a long time ago, I did my BSc in Exercise Physiology and Nutrition. These days, I only work with tactical and extreme athletes. I don't see anyone else. So my experience with CrossFit is really back in Afghanistan. So I was treating CrossFit injuries before I even knew what CrossFit was. So I had a little insight into what was going on with these particular cohort. It was the US Marines out in Kandahar who I was working with. And they were coming to me with a lot of shoulder and low back issues, just little niggles that were easy to get rid of. I've done a significant number of competitions over the last 7 years. I've worked with CrossFit athletes from the elite, and I also work with the beginner. I participate in CrossFit myself, so I practice what I preach, and I've got a balanced view and a lot of experience in CrossFit. Like I said, I've done some research in CrossFit, and I also audit my own work, which is important. So let me take you back to Afghanistan 2010 and 2011. So I did 2 operational tours, one in 2010, one in 2011. Okay, you can see me on the left there. That was my day job, doing the rehabilitation gun with the Afghan National Army. Getting them back on their feet, back into the fight. And then we're also doing things like functional movement screening, injury prevention stuff for the troops on the right. So what we saw was a lot of people a bit bored in between the operations, and they needed to stay fit, and they were using any means necessary. You can see some US guys there using some gymnastic rings on the tank. Okay, so after I came back from Afghanistan, obviously I started doing CrossFit. I've got significant interest in CrossFit. I was invited to the Reebok Invitational held in Berlin, and there I got to meet some of the stars of CrossFit, Sam Briggs, Camilla Blanc-Bazinet, and obviously Rich Fronin. If you don't know who they are, you can Google them. They're pretty big stars. Then I was CrossFit Regionals with my good friend, chiropractor Rob Crowley, who heads up the team. You can see the bearded guy with the glasses there, and there's a couple of the CrossFit faces just to prove I was there and that we'd done that. Okay, and that was when regionals used to be in Denmark. Okay, this year CrossFit Regionals was in Madrid again. Rob heading up the team, and this time CrossFit JST, Steve Fawcett and crew. managed to get through to the CrossFit Games. It's the first time a British team has done that. That's pretty amazing, and it was nice to have paid a small part in just keeping them injury free. But an amazing effort to CrossFit GST. They are phenomenal. So high intensity functional training. Rather than HIIT training, this is HIFT training. And it was all the rage in Afghanistan back in 2010, 2011, when CrossFit was quite a new concept. Nobody really knew what it was. So military personnel sustained a significant number of musculoskeletal injuries from just running too much. They didn't know what to do, so they just went out and ran. Okay, and this is what we refer to as junk miles. There's no point of just going out and running in terms of exercise, in terms of training, and in terms of injury prevention. It was also difficult to do in Afghanistan because it was very hot and the air quality was very poor, particularly if you're in a military base, you're just breathing in diesel the whole time. Not great for you. So the troops needed a more time efficient, a more exciting program because it's all about general physical preparedness. So gym equipment was not always available, so you're training with what you had. The thing is, when you take the world's soldiers and you put them all in one place, everything gets competitive, and extreme workouts kind of became the norm in every gym. Most workouts were well beyond the capacity of the average shoulder, no matter which country you came from, and most extreme workouts were incorrectly labelled CrossFit. Okay, so there was an incorrect labelling. Everything that people were doing which was just extreme became CrossFit. So if you were really lucky, top left, you were in a nice air-conditioned tent and you were able to watch TV on the cross trainer, and you had a well-filled gym, top right. Or if you weren't so lucky, you were using the axle of a vehicle with tyres, okay, an old picnic bench to really just get some bench press in, or you were just making do with a bit of old scaffolding, doing some pull-ups, some heaves, and some dips, and just making fitness with what you had. So there was a significant variety of training, and you might also, when you go out into the patrol base or the forward operating base, be in this very restricted area with minimal kit to train with. So you had to kind of come up with a training philosophy that would keep you fit. Now, this is where, particularly in the barracks as well, like extreme workouts just became stupid. Things like, this is an example of it, like 100 push-ups followed by 100 pull-ups followed by 100 overhead press. There was no programming involved. Squats and push-ups, 5,000 squats, 1,000 push-ups. You can see the guy just doing press-ups on gymnastic rings with a tire on his back. And everyone was obsessed with extreme and being competitive, and things got a bit silly, if I'm honest. So the fiction was that everyone thought they looked and trained like the guys on the left, and the reality was that maybe a lot of people ate pizza and didn't do as much training as they thought they did. So, what's CrossFit? So it's evidence-based fitness. It's measurable, observable, and repeatable exercise, and its driving force is about work capacity across broad time and modal domains. Okay, in a nutshell, it's constantly varied, not random, but constantly varied, high intensity functional movement. And this will be combining components of gymnastics, powerlifting, weightlifting, that's Olympic weightlifting, and metabolic conditioning in workouts that can take anything from 2 minutes to 45 minutes up to an hour. And just so you're familiar with the CrossFit methodology, so it's very clever, it's been very well thought out. Nutritional basis, then metabolic conditioning, then gymnastics, then Olympic lifting and doing some throwing, and then obviously sport. And now CrossFit has become a sport itself, the sport of training. So the benefits of CrossFit are, no more advantageous in terms of the literature than anything else. CrossFit's strength lies in the fact that it's going to be getting you a better all-rounder. Because of the constantly varied nature of the training, it's stressing your body in a different way every time. So you generally find things that you suck at and you're not very good, and things you're actually really quite proficient and good at. But because of this constantly varying phenomenon, your body's constantly being challenged, and you're constantly learning new skills. So most of the literature here points to the fact that you're going to decrease your fat mass. So your body composition is going to be better, increase your muscle mass. But what they don't say, and you're going to increase your VO2 max and your general work capacity because of the evidence-based, the metric nature of CrossFit. It's also using functional movements. Get away from this kind of isolation movement, and it's the functional movements of daily living. So pushing, pulling, hinging, squatting, lunging, gait, all that good stuff. But traditional sort of weight training is based on the bodybuilding model that some of the soldiers were still doing, whereas this kind of push for functional fitness has a better crossover to the activity that soldiers, firefighters and generally people need to do in function. So there's a growing body of evidence. It's still not great at the moment, but HIIT training, so high intensity training, interval training or high intensity functional training, it is likely to be the future. And it also doesn't focus on the community. There's a huge social adherence community to CrossFit that hasn't been mentioned here. So the trouble is, when someone does CrossFit, they get a bit enthusiastic about it. So how do you know someone does CrossFit? Quite simply, they tell you. And what we've got to be careful of is that they're doing CrossFit, therefore they think their training methodology is head and shoulders above yours. And we've got to be a little bit careful with that, because different training systems can be just as good depending on what your goals are. This is just one different modality that happens to be pretty successful, and it's been well thought out. And there are a lot of people doing it. So what's the problem? So really, CrossFit didn't help itself when the kind of mascot was top left there. You can see Pukey the clown, which is great in a military environment where that kind of dark humor is accepted because of the job you do. It doesn't cross so well into the public domain. And as a consequence, the fitness industry picked up on this, okay, particularly with regard to this injury causation potential. Talking about pain, we've started hearing about rhabdomyolysis. What is it, and what is its connection to CrossFit? Okay, and lots of media jumps on the bandwagon that CrossFit causes injuries, and then potentially is CrossFit dangerous? And a lot of sensationalism, not a lot of evidence, not a lot of facts. So, let's look at, the problem. So the US military stopped endorsing CrossFit due to a high number of reported injury rates from Iraq and Afghanistan. And what was happening, as I said before, everything was called CrossFit. People were doing extreme stuff. They didn't have the skill. They didn't have the fitness. And they were basically just copying people with no knowledge of what they were doing, because that's what soldiers do. They hadn't been trained in a CrossFit gym. They were just looking at their buddy. What's he doing? I'll have a go at that too. And then the American College of Sports Medicine, which is pretty much the gold standard in fitness for a long while, has cautioned CrossFit and labelled it an extreme conditioning program. And yeah, it is. So concerns were raised again about musculoskeletal injury with kind of anecdotal evidence. Exercise professionals were up in arms about Olympic lifting being performed 4 reps, and pushing people past proper form, particularly when they're fatigued. There was a lot of press about rhabdomyolysis, and musculoskeletal injury, and there was a basic lack of understanding about the basic CrossFit principles, like 3 days on, 1 day off, and about how how having a strength day and regular testing was important. You know, CrossFit is a whole clever philosophy that's really good, but people weren't actually listening to this, and that was the issue, I think. So the ACSM comments on extreme conditioning programs about how they violate established